Hello, and welcome to the first episode of this history series covering the Crusades, content that features in the IB history curriculum. My name is Lucas Richardson, and today we'll be covering the First Crusade, including the events and origins of this conflict. Without further ado, let's begin. The origins of the First Crusade can be found in the expansion of the Islamic Empire in the 7th and 8th centuries, primarily with the loss of Jerusalem in 637 AD. The rise of the Rashidun Caliphate did not provoke an immediate response from Europe, rather that it is likely that the Western world at this point was neither politically united nor militarily capable of launching any kind of serious response or expedition to the Near East. However, fighting did occur between Catholic Christians and Muslims throughout Spain and at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD, which saw the Frankish king Charles Martel defeat an Umayyad invasion of what is now northern France. As many historians have surmised, the greatest motivation for the First Crusade came through the Byzantine Emperor Alexius Comnenus' appeal for assistance from Western Europe. In the decades preceding the declaration of the Crusade, the Byzantine Empire had been decimated by the invasion of the Seljuk Turks, who through victory at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 had managed to conquer much of Anatolia, including the city of Nicaea in 1081 and Antioch in 1084. Alexios had originally requested a small force of Frankish knights for service against the Turks. However, by appealing to the Pope, Urban II, this plea morphed into an enormous religious movement involving the Pope himself preaching at Clermont in 1095, and numerous other members of clergy proclaiming the crusade around France, Germany, and Italy. Although much of this was directed towards the ruling elites of Europe, many common people took up the crusade, culminating in the People's Crusade of 1096, which contained very few trained soldiers and knights, and left before the official expedition. The People's Crusade was annihilated by the Turks at the Battle of Civitot in the same year, after they crossed the Bosporus into Asia Minor. The actual force was led by Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, Tancred of Hauteville, Godfrey of Boulogne, Baldwin of Boulogne, Hugh Count of Vermandois, who was the brother of King Philip I of France, Robert Curthose, the son of William the Conqueror, and his relatives Stephen II, Count of Blois, and Robert II, Count of Flanders. As many of these men were princes in their own right, and were in the line of succession to various fiefdoms around Western Europe, the First Crusade has sometimes been described as the Prince's Crusade. So, these men gathered their forces throughout 1095 and 1096, and agreed to meet at Constantinople in early 1097. According to the Crusader historian Thomas Asbridge, Godfrey of Boulogne was the first to arrive on the 20th of January. Alexios I was surprised at the size of the army that had arrived, and was especially suspicious of the Sicilian Norman, Bohemond of Taranto, who in the past had invaded Byzantine territory in the west. Nevertheless, the emperor compelled the princes to swear an oath of fealty that any land recovered during the expedition would be returned to the Byzantines. Of course, this would not be the case, despite the fact that all except Raymond had taken this oath. In return, Alexios promised to give the Latins support in their expedition and provided one of his generals, Tatikios, to guide the crusade, although his presence did become a source of tension as he worked in the interests of the emperor. As the leader of the Turks, Kilij Arslan presumed that the Latin crusade would be no more formidable than the People's Crusade, he turned his attention eastwards, allowing the Crusaders to recapture Nicaea, and affording them the time to progress across Anatolia. Asbridge believes that there were some 75,000 Crusaders at Nicaea, including some 7,500 mounted knights and 35,000 light armored infantry. Bohemond's vanguard was eventually ambushed by the main Turkish army, culminating in the Battle of Dorylaeum in 1097. Nonetheless, with the support of Godfrey's rearguard, they managed to drive back the Turks and win a critical victory. The next major conflict came at the Siege of Antioch, which occurred between the years of 1097 and 1098, where the Crusaders, despite taking considerable losses, managed to break into the city and defeat the garrison. However, they were subsequently surrounded and besieged by the Turkish Atabek of Mosul, Kerboga, who besieged the city. The situation was overcome in battle outside the city walls, where the Crusaders charged out against the Turks, and despite all odds, managed to defeat them. This victory opened up the rest of the Levant for conquest, and caused many of the princes to split up in order to capture the various cities of Outremer, and to establish the Crusader states. The first of these was the county of Edessa in northern Syria, which was formed before the siege of Antioch by Baldwin of Boulogne, after being invited to rule by the local Armenian Christian population. The next was the Principality of Antioch, which came under the control of Bohemond of Taranto, and later Tancred, whilst Godfrey of Boulogne took a contingent of 10,000 men further south into Palestine to besiege Jerusalem, the objective of the entire crusade. He managed to capture the city on the 15th of July 1099 after the strategic movement of some of the Latin siege works, and through desperate fighting with the Fatimid garrison. Nevertheless, it was taken. Following the death of Godfrey a year later, Baldwin, the Count of Edessa, was coronated and the Kingdom of Jerusalem was founded. Baldwin would later go on to expand the realm and dealt with numerous invasions from the Fatimid Caliphate, centered in Egypt. Still, the kingdom endured until the invasions of Salah al-Din in the later decades of the 12th century. The First Crusade was a remarkable achievement for Christendom, given the sheer number of factors that played against the Franks, although credit has to be given to the fractious state of the Levant at the time, as territory was divided between rival sultans, atabegs, and emirs. Many historians believe that if there had been a common front against the Crusaders, even in the years preceding the foundation of the Crusader states, the movement would have likely ended in failure. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this was useful in your study of the First Crusade.